Hey everybody, my name is Edgar. I'd like to welcome all of you back to another episode of Defusing the WMSCOG. And man, am I excited today. This person that I'm about to interview really reminds me so much of myself, and his story is really incredible. He also happens to be an ex title holder, a deacon who just left the WMSCOG. So, without saying too much, I want to go ahead and give him the floor to allow him to introduce himself.
Hi, Edgar. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. Excited.
Good, good, good. First, I want to thank you for allowing me to be on your platform. I saw many of your videos and everything, and yeah, I'm here now. So, my name is Akanni Clark. From the Philadelphia Church of God location. I was a member for almost 13 years. Former deacon. I was a in 2017. I was a branch church manager. Well, we can say pre-branch church manager in Altoona, PA, which is about 4 hours away from Philadelphia, the main location. I was a branch church leader for about 3 years, and then came back to Philadelphia, 2019, and then became a unit leader for about maybe a year, and then after that, I was switched over to the office church, where almost 100 members are, in service, in attendance, and they keep worship there, and I was taking care of them as well.
So,
Yep.
what year did you come in?
I came in 2013, 2013,
2000.
March of 2013.
Okay. So yeah, that's right after the 2012 doomsday prophecy took place. Okay. So yeah, man, it's still very early, and man, I'm excited. I'm excited about this. So, how'd you get introduced to the WMSCOG?
The funny thing is that I didn't get introduced. My story is different. I didn't get stopped in a Walmart or a Target. I was at work actually, and at this time I was actually seeking a church that kept the Sabbath day. And
Really?
yeah,
Why is that?
because I used to do like a martial arts. It's called Jikandu Kali, with an older gentleman. And not only did he like teach me like martial arts or whatever the case may be, but he also had like a little bit of Bible knowledge. So he told me that the Sabbath day was Saturday, and that we should go to church on Saturday, not Sunday. So I began to look for a church that kept the Sabbath day. So I wound up bumping into the Hebrew Israelites. I was with them for maybe about a month, and while I was with them, I realized that they're very militant. They're very aggressive, no love at all. And I didn't like it there, but at the time it was like, wow, this is the only church that acknowledges the Sabbath day. Also, too, they're very racist too, as most people know. So, um, as I was, going there to, keep, services here and there, I was, still going to work, and I was working at a power plant, not a power plant, I'm sorry, a recycling plant. And one of the Church of God members were there. So when we had a lunch break, I went into I met him in the lunchroom. His name is, well, I don't know if we can say their names, right? Can we
You
say?
can say their names.
Oh, anyway, his name is James, Deacon James. I met him, in there at lunch, and I tried to preach to him about Black Hebrew Israelites.
Oh wow.
So, so obviously, right? Obviously, James is black, right? So, so I told him, I was like, "Hey, you're like a Black Hebrew Israelite." He was like, "No, I'm not. I'm not a Black Hebrew Israelite. I'm an Israelite inwardly, like a spiritual Israelite, spiritual Jew." So I was like, "Oh, okay." I mean, my mind, I'm like, I never heard of that before. So I was like, "Well, you ever kept the Sabbath day?" He said, "Yeah, I keep the Sabbath day like, all the time." So, long story short, I pretty much invited myself to the Church of God. So I was like, "Oh, can I come for a service?" Because mind you, at the location where the Black Hebrew Israelites were, they were racist. I wasn't comfortable there, and at the time, they were the only ones that acknowledged the Sabbath day. So when James, told me that he kept the Sabbath day and he wasn't a Black Hebrew Israelite, it was like a breath of fresh air. So So yeah, fast forward to me going to the church again. I kind of like invited myself to the church because I was really interested that he kept the Sabbath day. So my first time there was a weekday, and I I don't really remember. I know it was in March. I don't remember the day, but I'm sure it was a weekday. We got off of work, and then he wound up taking me up there. At the time, I didn't drive. I was about 18 years old, and we go into the church. We open the door, and I think one member, Russell, is there. He's like the only one in there, and then I think also the overseer, Pastor Paul, was there. At the time, he was missionary Paul, um, and Deacon Cameron also was there too. He's missionary Cameron now. He studied Secret of the Forgiveness of Sins with me, and through that Bible study alone, I got baptized. Then after that, I told my mom. At the time, I lived with my mom, and she too got baptized as well. She studied with missionary Denise, and they studied forgiveness of sins, and I think they also studied about God the Mother. And then she got baptized, and then yeah, that's how I got in, and I was keeping service. I was keeping services, third day worship, and I did construction in the church. I did construction in that church, and then also in other locations. I began to do the volunteer services, whatever activities they had to offer. I was in for it. And let me be clear that in the beginning, like yeah, there were good, vibes, and there was nothing weird. Of course, like there were things that were different, but I'll play possum, right? I'll play possum. Different doesn't mean wrong, right? Like they always say, like Church of God always says, different doesn't mean wrong or different doesn't mean weird, right? It just means different. It's true. This is true, and it was different. And then I did have really good encounters with the members in the beginning. So
There are members, and I've always said this, I've said this in the past, there are genuine members in every cult. There's outstanding, great people, and so no knock on them there, but it's the system, you know what I mean? Like these people are still, regardless, everyone is told in that church, this is how you need to approach newer members. This is how you treat them. This is how you behave. This is how you act. So Clark, take me through, in the beginning, because it seems to me from what you're explaining, when you first joined the World Mission Society, it seems like it wasn't that big in Philly. Like it was, close knit, and you guys were barely, you came in right as maybe it was getting ready to explode. So you have good insight, of how it was in the beginning. Can you maybe explain more about, besides, I'm assuming the love bombing was there, and when it's a smaller group, they cater more to the individual, you know what I mean, than it is when it starts to grow, but take me to maybe some of the things that you remember, in the beginning. And I think it is important to mention not just the bad things, but also there was good things. I always say the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're here to tell the truth. So maybe what do you remember from all that time in the beginning?
and that I'm going to answer your question, but that leads me to another point. I personally really love those members, and I continue to give my story, my testimony, then you'll see that I really love those members from the heart. Um, and yeah, we did have many good memories and everything like that. From the beginning, when I first came in 2013, as far as I was told, they just transitioned into that location. So they were originally like a house church based out in Burlington, and a deaconess used to take own that house church. And what happened is, like, missionary Richard, who left that church, used to do worship services over there. And I heard all many other overseers used to take turns taking care of the church, because that a woman can't lead the church, like she can't lead the church services. And then eventually, as the house church began to grow, then that's when they finally opened the main temple, which was in Philadelphia. It's technically not in Philly. It's not in Philadelphia. It's just outside of Philadelphia. It's in Jenkintown, PA. So it's like more like a suburbs area of Philadelphia. And yeah, so it was a small group. Small group. I want to say maybe about At the time, I want to say no more than 100 members. Because I know now, in order to establish a temple, which that location was, um, you had to have at least 100 members. So I wanted, respectively, I want to say it was 100 members, right? Uh, a low number.
My question is, did they focus on you a lot? How was the preparation for you to, go through the sermon books, and what made you, really want to dive into what this church has to offer?
Okay, so um, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, there was a lot of attention on me than usual compared to today because there were less members, and not only were there less members, but there were also less brothers. In like almost every church, there's like the sisters always outnumber the brothers. So I remember the Deacon Cameron, again also now known as Missionary Cameron. He used to study with me directly, sometimes with other members, and then like smaller groups, and then we would do a lot of preaching practice too. So at the time, members who were like assistant overseers now, they would study with me a lot. There was one brother who gave me a suit. I didn't have a specific brother take care of me. Later, we had a little bit of more structure, but yeah, I want to say there was a lot of attention that was given to me, and then I would like because I would participate a lot, so there would always be that one little caretaker near me, almost every time, especially to the field preaching. And then what encouraged me to studied all the sermons was my family. I told you that my mom got baptized, but I didn't tell you yet that she left because she told my aunt about the church, and my aunt went on the internet, and my aunt was like, "Oh, that church is a cult. You got to get out of there." So, my mom, she told me, "Don't go back to that church." Mind you, I lived with her at the time, so she said, "Don't go back to that church. It's a cult." So I said, "Okay, no problem." And at that time, Passover was about to come up, first Passover. So I missed first Passover, and I left the church for a little bit, and then Deacon James wound up preaching to me again at the job site. He was looking for me. I was kind of like hiding from him, but he looked for me, and he showed me this UCC. Do you remember UCC Space?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, UCC Space video about I guess about Passover and disasters. And I don't know if you remember, but there was this one video when there was a little girl. She was looking at like this world explode, and you can see it in her eye, like the reflection of her eye.
Yeah.
The world is like blowing up. So kind of like that fear thing, trying to get you scared and everything. Like keep Passover or you'll be destroyed. So anyway, I got scared and I kept Passover. I kept second Passover. So when I come back to the house that night after keeping second Passover, my mom tells me, I told her that I went to the church. She said, "I thought I told you not to go to that church." She yells at me, and then eventually I get kicked out because I went back to that church. Right. And then I moved with my, I remember we were talking before, and I was in boxing. I moved my boxing trainer. So I stayed with him because I didn't have anywhere else to go. So I wound up staying with him, and they helped me move out or whatever the case may be. So what moved me to study a lot was to save my family, my mom that left, right, and then my brothers and sisters that weren't in the church. So what moved me to study about Passover, Sabbath day, and all the subjects that they had to offer was my family.
Man, so crazy to hear you say all that, bro, because again, it's just people are probably like, man, Edgar's being annoying, but man, I see so many resemblances in your story. Like you have a good heart, man, and I can just imagine when you came. I don't know you when you came in how you were like, but if you were anything how you are now, like if you were anything like how you are now, man, like you're very articulate, you speak very well. So I can imagine the WMSCOG see you coming up and they're just like, man, we could take full advantage of this. And like you said, you're a boxer, and we've had many private conversations about this. I love boxing, but I also know boxing comes with a lot of discipline. And that is something that places like this, they see someone that's articulate, see someone who, it seems like your mom raised a responsible, very well educated young man. You have manners, so they see all that and the discipline. And I can just imagine what they're thinking, because I'm putting myself in their shoes when we would go establish churches. And I remember seeing people like that, and I'm like, man, this is the people. These are the ones that mother wants, And why? Because you feel you can get the maximum out of them. And obviously it was true, because you ended up becoming a church leader. So my question to you is, how long did it take you to kind of climb the ranks from when you first joined? And also, I guess before that, take me also to, you get kicked out of your mom's house. And so now you're staying at your trainer, with your trainer. From there, is that when you go fully like all in on the church?
I want to say I deep dived when my mom left. You know, when my mom left, and I was brought back for second Passover. That's when I really deep dived, because they showed me some convincing things. How to counter what was being said on the internet at the time. So that allowed me to be stronger and move forward. And then also getting kicked out, they're trying to, they're blowing me up like, oh yeah, that's persecution, so you should feel good, like, that's something that you should be proud of, like God is proud of you that you did that. So anyway, I took it, and then yeah, from there I was like, okay, I'm starting my journey. So now I'm going to just learn everything and then try to save my family through what I learned.
Man, again, hearing you say that brings so many memories. Even in 2013, you just brought me back to a memory that I think we haven't talked about on this show, which is 2013. After the 2012 failed doomsday prophecy, it was known in the Midwest region as like darkness, because there was no prophecy. And so I remember what ended up happening was, because 2012 never took place, a lot of people started to leave the church. And so the church had to scramble to do something. So what ended up happening was, beginning of 2013, they heavily focused on countermeasures. And I think that from a lot of people that I've talked to, that was everywhere. And you bringing that up, that when your mom left the church, then you came back because of the fear tactics, and you had to leave your mom's house, and all that stuff was going on. What solidified it for you was that those countermeasures, they're bringing you the things that are brought up on the internet, and they're dissecting it. But it's important to understand, you weren't watch and correct me if I'm wrong, you yourself weren't deep diving or investigating for yourself the claims that were being said. You were just hearing the countermeasure. They were bringing you the countermeasure the way that they want you to understand it, and then they were giving you their side of the story. They weren't encouraging you to do your investigation on your own. Am I correct?
Right, exactly. That looking at the internet, wasn't a thought, and neither was it presented to me or recommended of me to look at the internet to see what they say, and then ask a question about it.
And now that we're on the topic of that, Clark, let me ask you this. Did you ever hear, while you were in the World Mission Society Church of God, that getting on the internet was equivalent to eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil?
Correct. I did hear that. I did hear that. Even more so currently, now of my exit out of the church for good. It was said many times and in many different ways, right?
Mm,
So not only getting on the internet, but also trying to ask questions about things like the three chapters that were removed.
mm.
That was transitioned into those who try to ask, That's like trying to eat from the tree of knowledge, good and evil, because God took it away. Why are you trying to eat from something that? So now they're trying to make that like eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So yeah,
Yeah.
to answer
Yeah.
ultimately, yes, they did say it. They said it a lot. They also even made a video one time where they had said that the internet can be the tree of life or it can be the tree of knowledge of good and evil, depending on how you use it. So of course they said if you use my page or my memo or any of the apps from the church, that's eating from the tree of life. And things like obviously bad things on the internet was eating from the tree of knowledge, good and evil, right? So also they had mentioned that listening to internet slander, right? That's also eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah. It's hilarious to hear you say that because obviously me and you talk, so you know everything that's going on,
Yeah.
but right now the church is, I'm hearing from everywhere. Well, thankfully you're fully out now, you're speaking out, but I'm in contact with multiple leaders and we're hearing the same thing, and we're seeing, people are leaving that place, and they're in big numbers. And even recently, I mentioned, this to you earlier that even we heard Daniel Lee's daughter from the East Coast has left the church. We're waiting on hearing some confirmation of everything that happened, but we even got screenshots of the I believe his name is that he's an elder, right? Elder Kim would be her husband, correct?
Elder David Kim. Yep.
Elder David, that's right. Elder David would be her husband. I got screenshots showing that he posted messages on the group chats with the church in Vegas, claiming that he was going to be swapped out. He was going to be relocated, be under mother's guidance. He doesn't give the reason, but he mentions it's because it's not good for him to be alone without his partner, his helper. And so, from what I've heard from multiple people that I talked to, is she is out of the church. I hope that that is true. And like I said, this is just one of many cases that I'm hearing that members are leaving in record numbers, and it's very it's fascinating to see what's going on because you're also seeing the damage control the church is trying to do. And so I'm really looking forward to getting to the part of your story when you talk about how you engage them with, because you went about it the way that the WMSCOG actually encourages you to do it, right? They say people that leave are, cowards if they're just burned out or they saw something online, and which is not true, by the way. But what I'm saying is, you, on the other hand, you did it by the book. You went and did exactly what they asked of you, and yet they couldn't give you any answers. But we'll get to that part. For the time being, since we were on the topic of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, I want to ask you your thoughts on why do you think that message is pushed to World Mission Society Church of God members?
I think it's pushed to World Mission Society Church of God's World Mission Society Church of God members to hide information, right? They're using it as leverage to hide information that they don't want to expose because they know that they themselves will be exposed and it will bring forth a lot of questions, right? Because these things that they're hiding and this information that they're not disclosing is information that contradicts their doctrine directly from An Sang Hong himself. So they have to make up some kind of, saying like, you want to look at this, then that's eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They have to make up something like that so that way they can prevent the members from looking at the things that they're trying to hide.
Yeah. Yeah, that is 100% true. And I like what you said. It's about not wanting to get the information to these members. I call it information control.
Right.
That's really what it is. This whole study, message of eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is nothing more than another way to control the information control. And so, what do I mean by that? Organizations like the World Mission Society, because believe it or not, if you're watching this World Mission Society, which I know you are, you're not the only group that pushes this message. The LDS Church pushed this message as well, and many other cult groups have pushed the same message of eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is information, doing information, or diving deep into information of the church you're a part of. And so why is that necessary? Because by them controlling the information that the members receive, they're able to control the member. If the member can only come to people inside within that same organization, then they can never be polluted in their minds by anyone else on the outside, even if on the outside it's not people trying to pollute them, but it's people trying to give them the truth and give them the answers, right? Or point them to actual evidence and history. And I think that that's very telling. A part of this, what this organization is really like, is they don't want you to do that. It will hurt them to the core. See, a truthful organization, Christianity, as much as people want to knock it, it's been around for 2,000 years for a reason, right? It's there, nothing to hide. It's right there, bare bones. Attack it all you want, it's still standing. These organizations, no, they gotta build like fortresses and walls and all these type of things. Keep out from researching us, from looking at the bare bones. Why? Because if they look at the foundation, they're gonna realize this is a sham.
That
That's why they have to put that type of fear mongering in you, that eating from first of all, the story in Genesis of eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil has nothing to do with information control. Adam and Eve were not punished, were not put to death because they gained understanding. It was because they disobeyed God. If wisdom is something that should not be obtained, then why does the book of Proverbs, that is written by someone inspired through the Holy Spirit, ask you to seek wisdom?
right.
Why does the book of Hosea, chapter 4, tell you that my people are destroyed from a lack of knowledge if knowledge itself is bad? Why would Jesus send his disciples out and say, go and see who they say the Son of Man is, if he was worried about controlling the narrative or controlling the information? And what you see is that the World Mission Society once again fails the test to show that they're an honest organization. They just fit the mold of everything that is considered a red flag when you think of a culty group. And so, yeah.
And to piggyback off of what you're saying, 2,000 years ago, Jesus didn't keep secrets from the disciples. Even if Jesus spoke in parables, the disciples will ask Jesus, as we know well, they would ask Jesus, "Oh, what did you mean when you mentioned about the parable of the weeds?" And then what did he do? He took them into another location, together with himself, some solitary place, and told them everything about what he was talking about concerning the parable. And then even when you go to Matthew 13:10, when they asked Jesus, why do you speak to us in why do you speak to people in parables? What did he say? Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you, but not to them. It means that Jesus didn't keep any secrets in regards to salvation from his disciples. So I want to transition that to, and this might go off of, track a little bit.
Let's
However,
do it.
yeah, I want to transition this into the three chapters that were missing, and also tie in the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because they say they took these three chapters away. But first, who had established them in that book firsthand? It was An Sang-hoon. So at that time that he put those chapters in that book, whether he already wrote them, from the beginning in that book, His mindset was to publish it and let it be given to the people. In other words, to eat from it as if you were eating from the tree of life, right? Then later, Zangil takes it away, right? Then didn't Anton say that that book was about the secrets of God? So if that book is about the secrets of God, why are we hiding those secrets from the members? Again, 2,000 years ago, Jesus disclosed all the secrets of the kingdom of heaven to the disciples. He didn't hold anything back. Then specifically regarding the truth book, there should be nothing removed because firsthand, An Sang Hong published it the way it was, with those 3 chapters included. It means that he gave it to us to eat from at a point. But God never gave the tree of the knowledge of good and evil for people to eat from the beginning. From the beginning, he said, don't eat from this tree. There was never a point in history where he gave them the okay to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So you can't compare tree of the knowledge of good and evil to the removing of the 3 chapters and wanting to know what they say. You can't compare. You cannot compare it because God gave it. God gave the 3 chapters, but God never gave the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So you compare to taking the tree of knowledge of good and evil away to taking away the 3 chapters. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so that's the thing. It's like they make up these curveballs to get you away from the truth, so that way they can cover their faults, their errors, because they know that the prophecies in those chapters have failed, and they don't want to be honest and say these are the prophecies that An Sang Hong wrote, but they failed. And then they try to tie in the whole what do you call it? Jonah's prophecy. That prophecy was already fulfilled through Jesus's burial, baptism, rather, what is it? Death, burial, and resurrection, right? It was already fulfilled. So why bring that prophecy back up? Why continue to use that as like a curveball to cover up their tracks? It doesn't make sense. So just being dishonest, right?
Yeah. Yeah, disorganized. That's a very good point that you brought up because if God is the one who allowed those chapters, right? If we're playing devil's advocate that is Ansan Hong is second coming Christ, he wrote that book. He wrote it as Tree of Life, right? And in Genesis story, he never promoted eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil or allowing that. So is World Mission Society willing to admit that An San Hong wrote then something that is tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Was that his purpose? If that is so, then he lied because, like you mentioned in the preface of the Green Book, he said, this book, what's written in this book, right? Not retracted, what's written in this book is worthy to be studied by everyone. I guess he meant not including World Mission Society Church of God members, but he didn't, right? And again, the contradiction is very crazy to me, but again, not too crazy because I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to control the narrative. They're trying to control the information because they know that unlike real Christianity, once you get into the bare bones of the World Mission Society, there's no way that you're going to stay there. There's just no way. Unless you just turn off your brain and ignore everything. That is literally the only way you can stay. And at that point, you know what I mean, I would call that blind faith because you're then just believing in, people say, yeah, you need to have faith. Yes, it's important to have faith, but even in the Bible, the when God is revealing himself of who he is, Jesus Christ is showing you his character. He's showing you how he fulfills prophecies, and he's showing you that he's an open book. And World Mission Society shows the opposite of that. Everything is very secretive. And so I think it's very telling. But that being said, Clark, so taking, your time in the World Mission Society in those beginning years, how long did it take you to climb the ranks to become a leader?
I became the pre-branch church leader in 2017. Um, so it took me about 4 years then, right, to become a leader. When I was sent out to a house church, I was never in a leadership position before then. So I was like fresh out, go out to Altoona, 4 hours away from the main temple. And at that time, I established that, house church with my, at that time, then unit leader. Um, Established it there. There were a few baptisms we had, a few members that were baptized that are still in the church now. And then eventually I came back, we closed it out, because I had, anyway, there were some issues that were going on where it was like, now you can't take care of the house church. I mean, in other words, I didn't have enough experience when they sent me out there. So they wound up taking me back. And then they sent someone else out there. Then they took him back. It just wasn't, I guess it just wasn't a good area. But also too, I was lacking a lot. I'm gonna be honest, I was lacking a lot. So eventually I came back. And again, as I mentioned in 2019, I came back and became a unit leader eventually. So
Okay.
while I was in the house church, I then got into an arranged marriage. And I was in an arranged marriage with, my wife at the time. And the build up to that was crazy. It was crazy because I don't know if we want to go into that now or
Yeah, let's do it.
yeah. So as I was in the house church, of course you need, eventually a woman there, right? So my unit leader, of course, was a male, so he couldn't stay there. So eventually he left, and I was there by myself, for maybe a few months, and then that's when the over time Elder Ivan, he pulled me to the side. We were in the office, and he asked me what did I think about marriage, and I said, yeah, why not? I guess let's do it. And I knew what it was for, and he explained to me what it was for. He was saying it was for the gospel, right? So this is why I'm bringing this to your attention is to do the gospel. So I said, okay, no problem. So he says, okay, well, what kind of women do you like? So I told him at the time, I was like, I like Hispanic women. He said, do you like big women? And then asking me about the size and everything. It was like I was going shopping for a second.
Yeah.
But
That's so two things. Just so that I don't lose my chain of thought.
yeah,
One, they make it very obvious that the arranged marriage is for the gospel work. And I'm assuming because you alluded to it earlier, they probably mentioned things like, it's not good for man to be alone. You know what I mean? You need a partner for the gospel. And you look at the New Testament in the book of Acts, you see all these apostles going out by themselves and establishing these churches. So another contradiction, in the World Mission Society doctrine, which we already know has more holes in it than Swiss cheese. But another part is even when you're talking about when they're going to arrange you, funny how what the things that they ask, even you yourself felt like you were shopping in a sense, right? But what does that say to, how for sisters listening to this that are in the church, for females, just think of how degrading that must be, that's what they view you as, that you're like being auctioned off. And I've heard this from multiple brothers, that really they get to basically pick, out of the sisters as if they have no say so. And again, they don't care if you guys really love each other or anything like that. They will just whatever benefits them, and so, but anyway, please continue, Clark.
yeah. And let me be clear. The men have a say so, and so do the women as well. The women can say no because it's been told to me, right? Um, so they can say no, but as we were going through this process, he said, "Do you like big women, slim women?" So I gave my answer at the time. So my answer to him was, "I like Hispanic women," right? So I'm not racist, but we all have our preferences. So I had my preferences. I had my preferences at that time. So he brings up, one sister. She's Hispanic. She had a daughter, and I didn't want to be with anyone who had a child. I wasn't ready for that. So I said no. So then they asked me, okay, well, who do you think? Then I brought up, two women, and he just said no, they're not ready. They're not ready right now. So pretty much it was a no, right?
Yeah.
So then he brings up two other women, and they're African American. And again, I'm not racist or anything. I like my African American women, but that wasn't my preference in relations to marriage and everything at the time, which is okay. So push come to shove, he eventually asked me about another African American woman, and I wound up he encouraged me to like date her. So now I'm kind of like pressured to go on a date with this woman. I won't mention her name because I don't want her to be embarrassed. But I'm encouraged to go on a date with this woman, and we go to Cold Stone, and we're talking or whatever the case may be. And at the time, I'm like, I'm not really interested. She wasn't on my radar. So one thing leads to another. It was a no, right? Then I go back to Altoona, and third day worship comes around. So before service begins, I get a call from his wife, Deaconess Arlene or Quantity Marlene, and she says, "What about this sister, my wife, who I'm with now, which we're about to get a divorce?" She says, "What about this one?" So I said, she wasn't on my radar either at the time, but I said, "Okay, let's give it a try." So we wound up going out, take it to a restaurant, and then one thing led to another, and we get married. We didn't have much time to get to know each other. We had about a couple days. If I'm being fair, maybe a full week, if anything. I don't even know if that's the solid story, but it wasn't a lot of time to get to know each other. So eventually we get married, and then even in that house church that we were in, within the small period of time that we were married, we had arguments. And those arguments, and then my reaction to those arguments, and everything like that, and then me being a branch church leader caused us to have to go back to the temple, if I'm being honest. And then we go back to the temple. They tell me I'm coming back for training. So anyway, I go back to the temple, get some training. I become a unit leader, and at that time, that's when COVID begins to transition, and we transition in. And COVID happens, and then eventually, I get sent to the office church. Right, I get sent to the office church. When I get sent to the office church, I'm not physically in there because we're still doing everything over Zoom, and home worship. But I'm taking care of these members via Zoom or whatever the case may be, and I would just study with the brothers. Um, and it went on from there as far as like leadership, and then do you want me to talk about the office church right now, or do you want me to? You have
Yeah, it's totally up to you. There's no script to it, man. Just whatever, feel comfortable sharing, whatever, wherever you want to go to next.
Okay. So yeah, so we get to the office church. Eventually, after COVID, we gradually open up, and then I'm in the office church. Later, we do construction. They built me a living space in the office church for me and my wife. I live in the office church, and eventually I became a deacon. I believe it was in 2022, October 2022. I became a deacon. I was going to like pre-theological educations and everything, studying a lot. And it became a deacon. And then the next year, August of 2023, I received baptism authority. And it pretty much goes on from there. And then that's when I'm taking care of almost 100 members in an office church, baptizing people and studying with people, and the whole
Yeah, the whole shebang.
yeah, the whole shebang.
So, one thing that I want to mention is when you brought up earlier when we were talking about how choosing your partner, and you mentioned that you had to say so, and the sisters also had to say so. But I also want to mention that there's a lot of people that I've talked to, and even people that I know personally, like here in Wichita, didn't get a say so, and they, and it's one of those things that really sometimes depends on who's leading, the church, maybe sometimes the overseers, but maybe at least one thing, the pressure, like if you're recommended somebody, there's already some type of pressure on you to, yes, you can say no, but the pressure is on. And how many times can you really say no before they start looking at you like, hey, what's wrong with you? What are you have the wrong intentions? And so it's just crazy to me how this place really will try to dictate something that's going to affect the rest of your life. And I'm sorry to hear about, you said that you're going to get a divorce from your wife from, that arranged marriage. I don't know if that's something that we can get into later, but those are definitely those are results of things that happen in the World Mission Society Church of God, unfortunately. And it's like, again, these people will waste your time and ruin your life, man. And these things do affect us, you know what I mean? And so it's just crazy to hear, man. But so once you become a deacon, and you get baptism authority. I'm assuming you must have been through the roof at that time, right? Like you were accomplishing maybe the goals that maybe you didn't have it set out that you wanted to be that, but having that mindset of World Mission Society Church of God member, you want to strive to be 144,000. You want to strive to be the best that you can, especially in a place that promotes, you know what I mean, competition. And because you want to be 144,000 and tickets are limited, people can be replaced, people can be thrown off, and new people added to the list. So I'm at that time, what was going through your mind when you're receiving like these titles?
Hmm. So when I received the title at the time, I just told myself, "You're not even worthy," because at the time that when I became a title holder, you had to, in order to become a title holder, had to get tested, right? So there was a written test, and then there was also like you had to preach a couple sermons. So I passed the written test, but when it came to one sermon that I, couldn't preach, clearly because I didn't like go over that sermon, and it was one of those sermons that you don't, it was always one of those sermons you didn't like study often.
Yeah.
That study I wasn't ready for really. So technically, I failed, and that's what the overseer told me at the time that recommended me. He said, "You failed, but mother had had believes in you, and they allowed you to become." So already when I became a deacon, I'm thinking like I'm not even worthy anyway. Like whatever, like it's nothing to boast about. So, but anyway, I was like, I was shocked, but at the same time, it was like I got to be like really humble.
So what was the first thing that was, asked of you that maybe was something that you hadn't experienced before?
Well, most of the responsibilities that I had before I became a deacon, and also when I became a deacon, were the same. The only difference was baptism. Before I was a deacon, I was not baptizing people, and then when I became a deacon, I was baptizing people. Also, too, I would officiate for the Passover. I think before I couldn't, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, I think I did before I became a deacon. I did officiate over the Passover. Um, but I think the most, you know, big biggest responsibilities is counseling the members as a branch church leader. And let me tell you the difference between a branch church leader and a pre-branch church leader. A pre-branch church leader, they would, only deliver the 50 sermons for service. And then also like they couldn't like of course baptize or anything like that. And they also can't counsel members. When you become a branch church leader, it means that you have a title and you have baptism authority and you're at a branch. So I was a branch church leader, and I was counseling members. And when I would counsel some members, when I would hear some of their stories, these were the biggest, responsibilities that I had to take on because when I counsel members, I have to, give them advice. Most of the time, I was telling them, "Here, let me ask the overseer, let me ask missionary, so that way we can make sure you're being guided correctly." But the things that I would hear, as far as like hardship and then relationships between, husband and wife and all these kinds of things, it was a very big, task to take. And sometimes it would require, talking on the phone with some members, or even just after the evening worship of the Sabbath day or third day, staying another hour or two talking to these members in a separate Bible study room together.
Let me ask you this. What kind of preparation did you receive to council members?
Honestly, I didn't receive much direct uh, counseling. I mean, rather not counseling. I'm sorry, instruction or education. Of course, there were like little things that, again, a lot of times I would just ask my overseer, and ask him how I should go about certain situations, case to case. And a lot of times I would just repeat what my overseer said if there was a similar situation that occurred. I would just repeat what I heard before in the past. And then if I wasn't too sure, but I gave them an answer, I would always confirm with the overseer, hey, this is what I said. Is that okay? Sometimes they would say yes, and sometimes they would say, yeah, but also say this, right? So it was never really like a structured one-on-one, education where, we learn how to counsel members.
And I want to say that this is one of the things that I really want to point out because, in your case, speaking solely on you, from getting to know you, not from this interview, but from getting to know you for some time now, I've realized you're a good person. You got a head on your shoulders, and I want to believe that even you were using your heart to do the best that you could to manage the situation, when these members would come to you. But I can't shake the feeling of thinking of some leaders that I know are just like jerks, and how you get no training, so you're just thrown to the dogs. And I can just imagine what's being said in some of these, one-on-one talks, and especially me myself, hearing so many leaders say how just some vile things like, 144,000 show no emotions. You put a smile on your face. If you're downcast, if you're sad, if you're going through a hard time, you're not God's children, because God's children is like Isaac, children of laughter. And it really worries me for the people inside the World Mission Society that are under leaders that are not don't carry themselves or behave themselves like you. Now, obviously, I'm not saying because I know you're like I said, you're a lot like me. We're gonna say we're not perfect, we're not, but compared to some of the people that I've met and a lot of stories that I've heard from members all over the world, oh, trust me, there's a big difference in people that really showed no emotion, no mercy, you know? And so I couldn't help but think of like the organizations right now, like, when you hear stories of like how Daniel Lee treats people, how I've told stories of how missionary Michael, and like I can in my head, I'm just thinking of so many people that people's mentioned to me, like Victor from the East Coast. I don't know what title he has, Rudy. I've heard of Rudy before. So many different personalities of these people who like ruled harshly over the members, and it breaks my heart, and it makes me worry about them. But let's also get into the baptism. As you mentioned, baptism authority was given to you at that time. So my question is, I've never heard of a breakdown of, what do they teach you that, when they're giving you this baptism authority? Do they teach you anything about baptism, what baptism means? Like is it like, do they give you like a pamphlet, like, look, this is how you need to carry it out? What is that like? And now that you know what baptism really should be, compare and contrast between World Mission Society baptism, how all that came about, and which in comparison to what you know now.
Mm. So as far as like knowing the details about baptism and like a whole study about baptism, they don't have like a certain class that they have for you. They do have like a video or whatever the case may be, but that video is from head office and it shows you how to conduct the right, how you go through the baptism ceremony, what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Um, at the time that you become a baptizer, they assume, I'm guessing that they assume that you already know what baptism is based off of their truth books, like My Sheep Listen to My Voice, or even Covenant and Commandment, which is another sermon book that General Pastor wrote. Um, Baptism is explained in there, so they would guess that you know you already know about baptism and everything like that. Um, when I became a baptizer, I had to learn the prayers, of course, how to say the prayers, and it took me about maybe 3 months to memorize the prayers. How you should place your hands. I was just practicing all those things. And that was pretty much about it. And then, as far as what I know about baptism, now, it's different, obviously, because you in the Church of God, you have to baptize in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and they say those names are Jehovah, Jesus, and Ansang Hong, and everything like that. But of course, when you look at the Gospels, you can understand that they baptized a lot, and they weren't using the name Ansang Hong, right? And then also, being baptized, now, understanding the true meaning of baptism, you can understand like how they put like a big emphasis on their baptism. Like if you don't get baptized, you can't receive salvation. Like you must do this. And of course, in the Bible, it says whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. And of course, we can talk about the teaching of the Bible another time because of time, right? But you can you would go around, you tell people that in order to be saved, you have to be baptized, and if you're not baptized, today or immediately, then anything can happen to you in an hour, whatever the case may be. Like be baptized immediately, right? Those things, right? That kind of teaching or whatever the case may be, that was the teaching that that you're aware of, that we were receiving the Church of God. But nah, now it's like you don't go around telling people that if you're not baptized, then you could die at any moment or whatever the case. You can get hit by a car. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
just the Bible, guys. Guys, read the Bible, read your Bible, and then just look at the book of Acts and look at the context of the Bible, and then you can understand the will of God when you just read, and of course pray to God and ask God to give you wisdom and understanding.
Amen. So you're telling me, Clark, that there's not a class in baptism where they are telling you how dramatic you have to be in saying the names when you're baptizing people?
Not a specific as it would just be now.
It was a joke, brother. It was a joke because the reason I bring that up is because every baptism that I was a part of in different parts of the country, when I would always the leaders always get so over dramatic when they're baptizing, and it almost seems like there must have been a class where they're like, look, when you get to Ansan Hong's name, you have to raise the volume, you know what I mean, and
Yeah.
on son Ho, you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, different overseers, different styles. So you have one overseer that'll be super loud, and you have another overseer that'll be like okay level as far as pitch when they
Yeah.
stand the prayer during baptism, and then you have the really dramatic, baptizers where it's like something crazy about to happen. Like something's about to go down.
You
Um,
got the Denzel Washingtons.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, my previous well, the last overseer that I had in that church, missionary Jonathan, when he would end his prayers, he would emphasize An Sang Ho's name. He was like An Sang Ho. I'm like, oh, okay, that's different. So they do the overseer training like every 2 years now, or I think every 4 years. If I'm not mistaken, but all of them are different. They have different styles. So his prayer was really different. It was like he would really you know, emphasize on the name An Sang Ho in his prayers. So I could imagine how baptisms are. Never saw him baptized. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I'd be curious to see how you conducted a baptism, brother.
I would say I'm like I wasn't too like all over the place at all.
Yeah,
I would just say it at a good point, at a good pitch. I
yeah,
wouldn't be like super loud and everything.
yeah.
That was it.
You know what's crazy to me is that it seems like they don't really teach you how to counsel members, which is a very important thing because what you say could affect somebody, you know what I mean? Like it could affect their health, their mental, like so many different things. Your words have the power to kill, the power to heal someone, to point them in the right direction, but it could also point them in the wrong direction. And then also, baptism's not just a minor thing in the Bible, and yet you would think that they'd have something more, than just a video of how to do it. You know what I mean? I'm sure that they mentioned a few things here and there, but it doesn't seem like they really emphasize, and that's because they themselves don't understand what baptism actually means
Mm.
biblically. And I think we've already discussed this, and you see baptism itself is something very important when it comes to the scripture, and it's just so crazy to me that a place that claims to be you know the knowers of truth, what I mean, the only ones, and they have the perfect truth, they themselves have no idea of essential basics of Christianity,
Right.
and that's saying something.
Right.
um I don't know if you want to say anything to that before we jump into the next topic.
As far as baptism or just
Yeah,
anything.
just baptism.
Yeah, as far as baptism, no, you hit it right on the nose. Like they don't teach like biblically how baptism should be conducted, or even the mindset, behind baptism biblically, or whatever the case may be. And of course, one could argue, or many could argue in that church and say, "Oh, did Father not teach about baptism? And are they not in the truth books and the sermon books?" True, you do mention things and you do go to verses. I'll give you that, but your agenda is the problem. Your ultimate
Mhm.
agenda of your baptism and the conclusion of your baptizing people is the problem. The fact that you're baptizing in the name of An Sang Hong, someone who's not even God, if I can emphasize on that point more, then that's the problem, because we cannot be saved by that name. Even he himself didn't believe that he was the second coming Christ, and he failed many prophecies.
Yeah.
So how can we then say that we should be baptized in that name? That alone lets us know they don't understand baptism.
Right, right. And even to your point in the beginning, when you mentioned about how the church emphasizes on the name of the Father, Jehovah, name Jesus, name Ansan Hong, and yet in the New Testament, show me one verse where the disciples were baptizing people in the name of Jehovah, where they were saying Jehovah, Jesus, there's not.
Right.
And so it just put it again. I call the World Mission Society Cheddar Bob because they shoot themselves in the foot with their own gun every single time. Their doctrine is not consistent, And again, like you mentioned, okay, they bring things up in their general pastors' books, but I guarantee you, what they bring up in general pastors' books don't show what baptism truly means. It's just, for the World Mission Society, the best way I can describe it, if there's non-members watching this, baptism, all it means in the World Mission Society is the first step in order to keep Passover. It's the first step of salvation, something you must do before receiving the seal of God, which is the Passover.
Right.
That is not what Christianity has viewed it as for 2,000 years, and I think there's a huge difference there.
And,
But anyway, we could spend all the time in the world talking about doctrine, but we're gonna do that, and again, this is why I'm so excited
sure.
with Clark.
Yeah. And Edgar, I want to be considerate of some members that know me and are surprised that I'm speaking this way, against what I've been practicing with them for so many years. And for the members that were in my branch that I delivered a sermon to, third day worship and Sabbath day worship, how could he talk like this now? The reason why I'm talking like this is because I read context. I read the context, and I came to understand that the things that are being preached in that church is not what the Bible teaches. They are cherry picking verses and making things sound good. But there are many other cults in Korea that do the same exact thing. if you didn't know, right? So you got to understand that when we read our Bibles, we have to also read context, understand the context. And this is what we teach in the Church of God. That's exactly what they always say. If someone says, oh, Sunday worship is not in the Bible, and they'll give you the example of Acts chapter 20, verse 7, or whatever the case may be. And what does the Church of God say? They use this verse to say they gathered on the first day of the week to break bread, but you have to read the context, read before and after the chapter, after the verse. But when it comes to talking about Galatians 4:26, that same point is not emphasized in regards to there being a God the Mother. Or read the whole text. What was the topic of Apostle Paul's uh, conversation with the church at that time? Was that point to let you know about God the Mother? Think about it. Those members who are watching, think about it. Read the whole book of Galatians. And is his intent to then introduce another deity? It doesn't make sense when you read the context. But if you cherry pick verses, it makes perfect sense. So I highly encourage you, please read your own Bible. Before I left the church that I was in, the branch church, what was the last, remember those members that were in the church with me, what was the last, we can say, activity I gave? Let's read the Bible. Read the Bible from beginning to the end. Keep track of your reading of the Bible. That's why I told you to do that before I left. And that's why my sermons before I left was Christ crucified is God's wisdom and power. That's why I emphasize on death, burial, resurrection. Because that's what the apostles were preaching. That's why I delivered a sermon like that. That was the sermon that I sent to missionary Jonathan, because you have to send your sermons to the overseer before you deliver them. And if they have something to say about your sermon, then they'll respond back to your email and let you know, oh, you need to fix this. I sent that sermon to him and he said nothing about it. If there's no response, it means deliver the sermon. And I deliver that sermon. And those members who take notes, check your notes. Christ crucified is God's power and wisdom. And we consistently on the Sabbath day went to many verses in the book of Acts and also in Colossians and many other verses to show that this is what the apostles preached. This was the gospel that was being preached. But you never hear a sermon like that in the Church of God. Or how about the last sermon that I delivered on the third day? The last service I delivered about how the Bible testifies about Christ. All the Bible prophecies in the Old Testament, you would be surprised that Jesus, when you find out that Jesus fulfilled all of them 2,000 years ago. You have to read the Bible. And that's what I was trying to share with all the members. So don't think I'm crazy. Don't think that I have a demon inside of me or whatever the case may be. No, I'm fine. And I'm still reading my Bible. I have the Bible that I got from the Church of God. I'm still reading my Bible every single day.
Amen.
So don't think that I just, left because I wanted to go back to the world or, because I wanted to do, like some have some fun. No, I'm reading the Bible. I'm reading the Bible more than ever before. And I'm stronger spiritually more than I ever was before. And if you have to call me, if you have to talk to me, please call me. Please text me. Don't be afraid. And I won't tell missionary Jonathan. I won't tell your overseer or your unit leader, your branch leader, or your group leader that you called me. We'll keep it between us. It'll be our little secret, right? And I will explain to you why I left. It was because of the doctrine, not because I was tired, right? Not because someone hurt my feelings. It was because of the doctrine is not right. This is my salvation. And if you're not going to be honest with me with information in regards to God who came in the flesh, then I'm sorry, I have to leave because I don't want to go to hell for believing in a false Christ. So when you come to me with information about second coming Christ, Ansang Hong, or whatever the case may be, you have to be correct biblically when you talk to me. Because I'm going to give you a hard time unless you explain to me very clearly, you prove to me that Ansang Hong is the Christ without cherry picking verses. So I just wanted to say that, Edgar.
Yeah. Hey, man, I'm gonna need to see your birth certificate, bro. Because the more you talk, the more I'm starting to think we got separated at birth or somehow, man.
Yeah,
No.
it's just crazy. And when you leave these churches, when you leave the Church of God, the Roman Society Church of God, they don't give you a platform to speak, your side. they give you a small portion of what happened or whatever the case may be. And they tell the members, hey, look, this is why he left, because of the 3 chapters. Do you think, the members that know me, do you think that I left because of 3 chapters? How many times did I tell you not to look at internet slander? How many times did I tell you follow Heavenly Mother? How many times did I tell you that? Think about it. And now all of a sudden I leave because of the things that I told you not to even worry about or shake. It means that there's something more than what they're saying. So please understand. Please understand. This is not just over some 3 chapters. It's that, and there's more. And then also, what was inside those 3 chapters?
Yeah.
And also, let me ask you a question. Did missionary Jonathan explain to you the explanation of the chapter about Elijah? Because a pastor personally called him from head office and gave him an explanation that he told to me, but he told me that he was going to share that explanation with the members while I was in there, but he never shared it. He never shared it. He never broke it down in details. You know why? I told him that night that whatever he explained to me, it didn't make sense. I didn't understand it. Please help me understand. Never gave me notes, never gave me the clear, full explanation, the structure. He just told me, hey, this is why. This is why Anselm Ho wrote this. I'm not going to go too much in detail about it, but my point is that they didn't give me a clear answer. And the answer that they gave me was not, it didn't sound right at all. It did not go together. It was like, how can you tie this with what's happening now? Some book in First Kings chapter 19 or something. So
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. So, and mind you, whenever in the past, when you talk to me about God in the flesh, oh, I understand. King David, all those prophecies, oh, I understand. This is like one of the first times that someone had to explain a prophecy about Elijah to me where I couldn't actually understand the connection when they add Heavenly Mother in there. So just keep that in mind. And also, by the way, I know he didn't explain that to you because you can't. It's not clear.
Yeah.
That's
And they will never go publicly to try to explain that because they know when they're trying to damage control, when they're trying to come up with these prophecies on the fly to answer the inconsistencies and the lies that they've told for so many years, or information that they don't even know themselves about fully,
yeah,
this is what they have to result to, right?
exactly.
And so it's pretty wild, but I can't wait to get to that part of your story. But now I guess this would be a great time to just go into the red flags because you just completely aired them out on on that, which is a red flag in itself. So now since we're on that topic, red flags or things that you met that you might have seen, witnessed, in the church, because I imagine someone that is there every day, someone that has a leadership position, you're going to witness a lot of things, and so maybe some things that stand out to you, during your time in the World Mission Society.
So some of the red flags that I witnessed, I want to begin in New Windsor. Um, as I mentioned, I would go and help and do construction in many different locations. One of them was a mission in New Windsor. Uh, I did a couple missions in New Windsor as far as construction, but this one was around the pond. So we were pretty much designing the pond with different rocks. Like we were putting certain rocks in place and we are making like a rocky path. So there was a construction team from Korea, from South Korea that came, and then there were a few brothers from different Zions, including Philadelphia, that went. Um, as I was moving some rocks, Pastor Daniel Lee, he was walking around. He was like a site manager on all the construction missions. If I was in New Windsor, he was like a site manager, just overseeing everything, yelling at people. I was one that he yelled at. So I was just trying to position the rocks. And because I wasn't positioning the rocks correctly, he came over and he yelled at me, like standing out of the pond, looking down at me as I'm in the water. Can you imagine? He's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing it like that? Look at how they're doing it. You see how they're doing it? Do it like that." And as I was looking in his eyes, I felt like, wow, why he's so aggressive towards me. At that moment, I didn't feel like he was like my older brother or whatever the case may be. I really felt like he was just like a slave master. And at that time, I received like when you're in the water, eventually for a long period of time, then your skin begins to, kind of like get really, really, really soft. and I began to get like blisters. So my hands, like the palm of my hands, began to bleed. And around that time, that's when he came around. So I was trying my best. And mind you, I'm not getting paid for any of this, right? I'm just trying to, in quote, grab a blessing. And he yells at me. Like I was young, I was much younger at the time in that church, but um, yeah, he yelled at me and just like looking down and like really like aggressive and angry attitude, and just really like really mean. Um, and then another occasion, this was these.
Give me
Go ahead.
just a second. I'm sorry to cut you off, Clark, but I think it's important to touch on this because he's he's the leader of the East Coast, right? And when I was a member, I left in 2021. The church, we were separated by regions, and I heard, Daniel Lee was always East Coast, but from what I understand now, he's overseeing the entire United States.
Yeah.
Like there's leaders in these different organizations, but he's the head of it all, right? And so to see how this man who has all this power, who's the highest as you can go, on the East Coast, and in America when it comes to World Mission Society Church of God. And when you look at what the Bible says about those who have a high position, right? Jesus Christ said that, he himself, even though being the master, came to serve as a servant, right? And he told his disciples to follow suit, to follow that example. And yet you have people like this who have that authority, that sense of that role in this organization, and you see how they carry themselves.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm talking about when I say Jesus Christ mentioned 2,000 years ago, by their fruit you will recognize them. And the fruit that it's talking about is not fruit of people converts. That's not the fruit Jesus is talking about. Fruit of the spirit or fruit of the flesh. Jesus says you can recognize a true or a false disciple by their fruits. And I think that is very important because not just to think about what you mentioned there, man, you a humble brother, because honestly that's very upsetting the way that he talked to you. But it's not like it's an isolated incident. We've seen how this man has treated so many people, from the East Coast, that people that I've talked to, like we've heard Corey's story, we've heard so many different stories of how this man carried himself. And it just shows you like how this place has no compassion. You know what I mean? They're and the fruit that they possess is arrogance. It's like they feel like they're on top of the world. They can do no wrong. They can talk to you however they want. And I think that kind of attitude is dangerous.
So let me give you a little bit more detail on Pastor Daniel Lee from many different perspectives. So as a member who is there, you had to have faith to go to New Windsor for a event or some kind of education. And this is what is told to the overseers. They'll tell that to the unit leaders. Make a list of who can go to New Windsor for this education or for this activity. Please only recommend faithful members, like members who are strong, because they know when they go to New Windsor, if they get somehow rebuked, then Pastor Daniel Lee's gonna go in on them. So get the members who are strong, members who don't talk back, pretty much like that, right? Members who have faith. So that's why when I was there, guess what? I was a member who had so-called faith, and I'm looking at Pastor Daniel Lee like this is the prophet. If the prophet says do this, then you do that. So that's the kind of mindset that I had at the time. And of course, I felt, what I felt towards him. Like it was like at the time, I was kind of like scared. It was like this is the prophet from God, and he's like yelling at me. He's like, and already you're getting told that you're a sinner all the time. So it's
Yeah.
like at the time, like in your mind, you think like, man, what's wrong with me? But when you look at it from a perspective of someone on the outside looking in, it's like this is your pastor talking to you like that. And then with the church leaders, I remember one church leader, Elder Ivan, he would always say, don't embarrass me, don't embarrass me, if we would go to some and he would say it jokingly at the time, but usually there's truth inside the joke, we'll say, right? So he would say, "Don't embarrass me, don't embarrass me." Why? Because you got people like Pastor Daniel Lee, who, if they come across a certain member, then guess what? It's done. It's done. Another red flag was, and these are different years that I'm talking about when I bring up these cases. Same person though, Pastor Daniel Lee. We had the 6 day creation inside of the hotel, and before we went, it was told not to ask questions because the Bible study was going to be lengthy. At the time, it was like an hour for each day to study, right? It's 6 day creation. One of our members asked a question. One of the members that didn't have, in their eyes, much faith, right? He asked a question and he got rebuked by Pastor Daniel Lee. And then kind of like embarrassed too, because I think he asked like how he was trying to Pastor Daniel Lee was saying, "Where are we now?" And he said, "Are we in an actual hotel or are we in the heavenly realms?" And I think the brother said, "We're in a hotel." In other words, that brother's not thinking spiritually in his eyes. So he's like, "What? We're in a hotel?" And then members start laughing and everything. And then he's like kind of like embarrassing them. So he's like, "Are we in a hotel? We're in a hotel right now?" Everyone says, "No, we're in the heavenly realms." Right? So Pastor Daniel Lee says, "What Zion are you from?" Brother says, "Philadelphia." So naturally, the overseer at that time is like embarrassed because like, oh, my member had to ask a question, and I just said don't ask questions. So when we got back to the church, he brought it up. Didn't I say not to ask questions? If you have a question, just ask me. But it's all because Pastor Daniel Lee, all that pressure he's putting on members and his attitude, you know? And then better believe if that church leader, if that overseer, if one of his members speak up and then, say something wrong, then that overseer is risking his, advancing as a, let's say if he's a missionary, is hindering him for really advancing to an elder or a pastor because not really controlling the members well, right? So all these overseers, they try to make themselves look good, right? So that way they can so they can advance and become more than what they are at that moment.
Man, hearing you say that, bro, is just making me think of just all the experience, all the people that I've talked to from the East Coast and similar experiences that they have with this man.
Yeah,
Just
it's
sounds
true.
like a jerk, man. Like sounds like someone that really is just just low. I don't know what words really to. I know what words. I don't want to use them, but just sounds like a dirt bag, to be honest with you, because it couldn't be any further from the personality of Jesus Christ that these people portray. And these are people who are supposed to be apostles of true God. And
Exactly.
but hearing you say that, man, it just makes me think, like, when you go to let me give you an example. I go to a Christian church, right? When I go to a Christian church, I normally would expect, and I've seen in different Christian churches, matter of fact, not just one, multiple occasions, even some before I joined the WMSCOG, when I would go to Christian churches, um, where I've seen people talk to the pastor in a disrespectful manner.
Yeah,
Usually it's going to be people that are just visiting the church for the first time, or newer people that don't have good understanding of faith. But you don't expect the other way around.
right.
You don't When I'm in these Christian churches, I don't expect the pastor to treat the members like that. It's the opposite. I expect to see members talk to the pastor in that type of way if they're new or don't understand or going through a hard time. And every single time I've seen the pastor react in a way that the Bible shows is a way that a shepherd should react, which is calm, gentle. And it just makes me think how this place is so backwards.
Right.
The way that they talk to us, it's complete opposite. And it just shows you again, where these people really think that they're untouchable, that they are the head honchos. They are, what I mean, that they can do no wrong.
Look, Edgar, I had general managers that we're better than them, the more we're more humbler than them, right? In the world, right? So it's like if my general manager is better than you when it comes to communicating with me, then actually, what kind of prophet are you then? Also, Zangil Jah, who they believe is God the Mother, if she's God and she laid hands on him, did she not know what prophet she was sending to the East Coast? Did she not know who she, gave a title as regional overseer to at that time? She knew exactly who he was and she knew exactly what she was doing. And she knows that he's that kind of person. Every single member can give you at least one, if not more, a bad story about Pastor Daniel Lee. I got another one. I was at pre-theological education. This was about maybe 3 years ago. And I was on the second floor. And at this time, they have like a lot of lodging for the students. So we sleep on campus. Well, pretty much on church grounds. But everything is like in a school setting or whatever the case may be. So there was one night, there was someone who they left feces inside the toilet with a whole bunch of toilet tissue wrapped up and put in there. So the toilet couldn't flush. Also, they have signs around the building telling you not to flush toilet tissue down the toilet. So that night, an overseer, we were told, put their hands inside the toilet and got it out, right? With their bare hands. That's disgusting. First of all, why didn't you just grab something to get it out, right? Why you put your hands in there? That's what was told to us, that he put his hands in there. Um, so the next day during education, Pastor Daniel Lee comes up and he says, "Who's on this floor, the second floor that I was also on too? There were many of us brothers on the same floor that incident happened on." He said, "Who's on the second floor?" So all the brothers that were on the second floor, we raised our hand. He said, "Who put toilet tissue inside the toilet and left feces in there?" Because one of the overseers had to put their hands in there and take it out. Obviously, no one admitted it, right? No one owned up to it. And maybe whoever did it, they didn't acknowledge that that's what happened. Maybe they thought they flushed. So no one said anything. So that got him upset. So he was like, "Who did it? Who did it?" And then, as if it wasn't enough, he told all the brothers that were on that floor to stand up. Stand up and go. All this is happening in the sanctuary, by the way. He says, "Everyone stand up. All the brothers on that floor that was on that floor stand up." So me and all the other brothers on that floor, we stand up, and he said, "Go up to the altar, the sanctuary, the altar, the where the podium is and everything." We all lined up. He lined us all up. He said, "Lined up, line up, side by side, shoulder to shoulder. Now put your hands up." We all put our hands up like this. And he says, "Tell me who put the toilet tissue and the feces inside the toilet." He said, "You're going to stand here." And we were standing there, standing there, standing there. And then eventually, like, he's like yelling, "Who did it? Who did it?" Eventually, you know what made him stop, Edgar?
What was that?
The overseers. The other overseers who are below Pastor Daniel Lee. They said, they realized, "Oh, this isn't right." They obviously slapped back into reality. They're like, "Oh, this isn't right. Pastor, that's enough. That's enough." So the overseers who are below, again, below the regional overseer, had to tell him that's enough. So eventually he says, "Okay, come down, come down, come down." Because I guess he realizes, "Oh, this looks crazy," right? If I had a video, oh my goodness.
Yeah, bro.
So so he said, "Sit down." So we all sat down and he said, "Whoever did this is as far as you're gonna go in pre-theological." In other words, don't have any kind of expectation to become a student. Don't have any expectations to become a deacon or a position or a title holder. Forget it, because you did this and you weren't honest before God. That's what he did. And whoever was there, if they are being honest and not trying to be on anyone's side, if they're being completely honest, they would tell you, "I'm not lying. That happened."
No, I know it happened. I wasn't there, but I heard the same exact story from someone else. I don't know if I interviewed them or if I heard it on Great Light Studios or if I heard it. I need to check, but I heard that exact same story. So I know that's true. I know that it happened. And I'm asking now the members that are there, that were there that day, if there's anyone who might have a recording of that, um, send it my way, reach out to me. Or if there's anyone that was there that would like to speak out on that as well, get back to me on that. Because yes, this is, it's just vile behavior, you know what I mean? And it's upsetting, man, because the way that they treat these people. And again, these people, you're taking advantage of people that look at you like if you're a prophet of God,
Yeah.
like if you're a person worth of respect and someone who is a godly person. And to see them take advantage of that, it really makes me sick and it makes me angry, man.
Yeah.
Because it reminds me, sometimes I'm sitting there, I'm watching Netflix, I'm watching different YouTube documentaries, different cults, and you see these cult leaders how they take advantage of people. And this is why we say that it's important. Like, sometimes when you're in a cult, you don't want to hear somebody that tell you that you're in a cult.
Yeah.
That hurts the worst. And when they're trying to explain to you and give you examples, it's like you shut your brain off on purpose because you don't want to hear it. And that's why I've always said that sometimes it's easier. One approach that I've always used with members when I first left, I noticed right off the back, when sometimes when you're telling them like, hey man, you're in a cult and this, they don't want to hear you. But when you give them, you send them something, or you explain about a different cult, you gather information about a different cult and what goes on in that cult, right? Or you send them a video or a documentary, it's easier to accept if it's not something close to you, close to your heart. And when you see that, you realize right away, oh, that's cult behavior. But then when you apply it to the World Mission Society, you're like, there's no difference. And the reason I bring that up is because sometimes even to this day, I'm fascinated by cults. I try to learn as much as I can. And when I see some of the abuse that goes on in these cults, all these red flags, and I'm like, man, like, they took advantage of this person. They took advantage of this group of people. Look at how they talk to them. Look at what they made them do. Like, this was their chance for them to wake up and see, but they never do. Why? Because they're so heavily brainwashed. And you're just like, man, like, it makes you upset. And now looking back at it, like, look at all the red flags inside the World Mission Society. These people carry themselves like if they are deities, and again, they're supposed to be embodiments of like Paul or Peter, John, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and yet totally different, night and day difference. The apostles
Yep.
didn't carry themselves like that.
Yep. And they would have like lectures about greeting. I remember one time we had an education in New Windsor during pre-theological. They would say, "Oh, you better greet. Please, not better. They didn't say it like that. You better greet, but they would say you should greet because this is like manners, is mannerisms, right?" But there's so many cases when they themselves wouldn't greet. They would act like they didn't see us. There would be so many times I would personally call out a certain overseer's name passing by in the hallway. Oh, God bless you. And I'll be specific. God bless you, Pastor John Casas. Pastor John Casas, he, every time I would try to greet him, he would never greet me. He would never greet me. He would always act like he didn't see me. And then some pastors like Pastor Victor, I know like some members say things about him too. I've never had any personal negative encounters with him, but I've always known him to greet me. Like he was always like gentle, right? And like very calm and like wouldn't raise his voice. But most of the overseers they wouldn't greet you at all. Like even pastor, like sometimes he would act like he wouldn't see you or whatever the case may be. But if you guys do it, if the students did it, oh, there would be a whole education. Why are you not greeting? Don't if you don't greet, then guess what? You won't go forward. Like like I get it. I get it. Because I would tell it to the members in the church that I was taking care of, the location I was taking care of. You need to greet because there were some new members that came, and sometimes members didn't greet them. And those members came to me. I was counseling them, and they would say, "Oh, these members don't like me." And then even I try to greet them, they don't greet me back. So even I would try to teach the members to greet because I was the one who would always greet. I didn't try to like ignore people. I would be the one to even tell my own members that I was entrusted to, please make sure you greet. That is so important. The moment you ignore someone is the moment where this place feels cold. Please greet members. When I would go to the main temple, a lot of times members wouldn't greet or whatever the case may be. And I felt that too myself. So when we would have, group leader and branch church leader meetings, there was one time when missionary Jonathan, he asked everyone, well, why are these numbers like low? For example, why are the preaching numbers low and why the attendance low, whatever the case may be. So he went around the room and asked everyone, why are these numbers like this? Members said, oh, maybe members are not putting in my memo, recording their work in my memo. Maybe something they gave some kind of different reason. But I said I think the reason why a lot of members are decreasing in the church or whatever the case would be, and a lot are not preaching, is because maybe they're looking at internet slander. And the reason why I had brought that up was because he brought that up. He brought that up the time we were in education. So I think the week after I left education, we had this meeting, and I had used that as a reason, because whenever you see this stuff on the internet, like the stuff that I'm saying, it's hard for you to go out and go and try to preach to someone and bring them to the church. How could you want to bring somebody to a church where they don't feel love, or you have a church where your unit leader or your group leader is talking about you behind your back? I don't want to go to that church or be a part of that church either. And that's what I said in the meeting. I said, if this church is like that, I wouldn't want to attend that church either. So a lot of times, we're just talking about numbers, but we're not talking about having love amongst each other. We're not focusing on ourselves. How am I treating these members? Am I being fair? Am I talking about them behind their backs and then putting on a fake smile when they go to church? Because that's what a lot is happening in these churches. A lot of that is happening. These leaders don't like these members. These leaders don't care about these members. There was a member who got picked up by ICE in my location, and I had no idea what to do. So I called my overseer and asked him, Missionary Jonathan, this brother got, picked up by ICE. How can we help him? Oh, Deacon, don't worry about it. Don't get too involved. And I get it, right? I get it, because it's like this is the thing that's happening actively nowadays. He said, "Don't get too involved." Okay, I won't get too involved because I don't want to get arrested or anything, or I don't want to like break a law, right? I get it, but his sense of urgency is my problem. He didn't have a sense of urgency about this member that got picked up by ICE, and I really cared about that member. He got picked up by ICE, and this overseer did not care about it at all. I had asked him, "What should we do about this?" Oh, there's not much we can do. I said, "Oh, okay, no problem." He said, "You can look into it." He said, "You can look into it." He didn't say, "Oh, Clark, you and Deacon, you and I can look into it." He said, "You can look into it and see what we can do." So I said, "Okay." So I hang up and I asked my wife, "What can we do?" And I was like, "Is there anybody in the church that has like some kind of like ties with immigration?" And she tells me, missionary Denise works for immigration, and missionary Denise is in the main temple with missionary Jonathan. So he didn't even bring her up. So I call him back or text him, one of them. Deaconess Halima told my wife, she told me that missionary Denise works for immigration. Can we talk to missionary Denise? Oh, yeah, I'll check it out. So a couple of days later goes by. He tells me, oh, has he had any DUIs or anything like that? So eventually he asked missionary Denise. And then I said, we called and asked his wife, because I can't ask him because he's taken away. Called and asked his wife. No, he's fine. He didn't do anything. He doesn't have a record or anything. He even had his papers, right? Never asked me about him again. I think a month, 2 months went by, 3 months went by. I cried for that member that night because he was taken away from his wife and his son that was like 3, 4 years old. I cried for him that night because I felt like that overseer didn't even care about him, and I cared about him. Because what if you were in that situation and you had your son and your wife taken away, separated from you? And then Lord knows what would have happened to you with those people. But you know what? He came back. Thanks to God, he came back. And I remember I was delivering a sermon, and for the service on a Sabbath day, he came home and he came for service, and I saw him walk in, but I didn't clearly like see who he was. Like right when he came in, I was on the altar praying or like singing new songs. But after the service, I acknowledged that he's there. And I was so happy to see him in my presence. The fact that he was with ISIS, and I've been hearing so many things about them doing these crazy things to these people that didn't do anything wrong, that are working every single day to feed their families. I was so happy to see my brother who kept the Passover. And I gave him a big hug and I told him, "You okay? Like, did they touch you? Did they do anything to you?" No, no, no. I gave him the tightest hug. And I was so happy. And when he came back, I didn't even tell my overseer because I knew that he didn't care about it in the first place. It didn't matter. Oh, he's back? Okay, good. Did you mark him on attendance? Probably. Probably would have asked me something like that. And by the way, this member wasn't a consistent member. So he wasn't tithing. He wasn't coming for Bible studies. He wasn't coming for service often. So he was one of those members that didn't really give anything to the church, which is why I can understand why the overseer didn't really care too much about him. So when he came back, I didn't even tell my overseer. I asked that brother, you hungry? You want something to eat? Just walk in the kitchen, have whatever you want. So this is what I'm talking. These are one of the things that I'm talking about. On paper, this church looks good. They receive awards. They do blood drives. They do all these things. But for your own family member that kept the Passover, you don't even care that he got picked up by some strangers that could do anything to him. And how about the members that have died? They don't even want to talk about the members that died because of disaster, due to disaster. You lie to these members and you tell them if you keep the Passover, then you'll escape disasters. I can give you a list of members who died from a disaster that kept the Passover. Oh, and we sweep it under the rug. You're not going to tell what happened. What happened to Passover? Passover didn't save them? So that's my problem. You guys are so into your Bibles in the World Mission Society Church of God, and you claim that you have the truth. But the so-called truth that you're preaching is not truth because you claim that if you keep Passover, then you'll escape disasters. But people have died from disasters in our church. This sister that I'm specifically talking about, Sister Isaiah, she died this year. And she bore fruit. I baptized her fruit. And she died from a disaster, a car accident. Then I don't question God's power. I question Church of God's doctrine. You claim you celebrate Passover, you escape disasters. The apostles never preached that. They never preach celebrate Passover, you escape disasters. They never preached that. But members have died because of that. So again, swept under the rug, didn't really care much about it. Didn't ask, oh, do you want to go to the funeral? Oh, none of that. None of that. So my point is that all these red flags all together, you can see that this church is not right. This church is not right. I don't care how many Sabbaths you keep. If you keep a Sabbath to a false God, what good is that Sabbath? If you keep to the Passover to a false God, what good is that Passover? You are keeping services that have empty and meaningless promises. So as far as the red flags, I think that's that's all I really have. There's another one where, you know what I mean? Like, I told the overseer that this newer member, he was my fruit. I baptized him. He had questions about the internet. And because he couldn't give a clear answer, he told me, "Oh, Deacon, maybe he might be a false servant. Don't worry about him. Don't worry about him." But never asked me, "Oh, how's this member doing? Did you study with him? Did you do all these things?" He never called me about him. Also, he knew towards the end, I had questions that I didn't clearly get answered. I wanted to see the truth books that Father wrote, that An Sang Hong wrote. I wanted to see, I want to see all the books that he wrote because you quote from Unsealing the Secret of the Seven Thunders, right? But we never read that. So how can you use that as evidence if we never saw it? We never saw that book. So how can you say, oh, he wrote in this book? Okay, well, did you read the whole book before? Oh, no, Deacon. Oh, remember when An Sang Hong did testify about mother? He said, I follow mother. Okay, in that sermon that we see in every video, right? That little short text out of the sermon that we see in every that written sermon, you never I asked him, what was the name of that sermon? He said, God. I said, did you ever see that sermon? Did you ever read that sermon? He said, no. So when it comes to the writing of that sermon, the overseer didn't even see it. And so we don't know the whole context of the sermon that An Sang Hong was writing at that time. They just take that portion out of the sermon, I follow mother, and then run with it and say, see, father testified about mother. So I had a problem with all the writings. I requested to see all the writings that An Sang Hong ever wrote. I requested to see all the books that An Sang Hong ever wrote or published, and I wanted to read them for myself. I'm not wrong for requesting that. I'm not wrong for requesting that because I want to be sure that what I'm following is correct. And you should have told me this from the beginning. We should have known about this from the beginning, but I'm hearing through a new member that's going on in the internet and then seeing things and then asking me about it. And then I got to answer his questions. But if I don't know the answers to those questions, who I'm going to go to? The overseer. But the overseer doesn't know. Call head office. Head office gives some bogus answer that doesn't even make sense. And then they don't even check in on me to see, hey, Deacon, you okay? I noticed that you really requested. Are you okay? Never checked in on me. Never checked in on me. Never checked in on me or my fruit. Oh, is he okay? Does he understand? That's the problem. They don't care about members. If you don't understand, if you don't accept this answer, then go ahead, no problem. But in the beginning, they'll say, "Oh, ask any questions you want. Ask any questions, we'll answer." But when these questions start getting a little bit in higher grade from deacons and other leaders that they can't answer because they'll expose themselves, oh, it's either this way or you got to hit the road. So guess what I did? I had to hit the road because I didn't want to stay in a church that taught false doctrine. And please understand, before I left, I did study. I studied and I made sure that what they were teaching was in the Bible. And it's not. It's not in the Bible. They cherry pick verses. So eventually I leave all the group chats, the signals. It was on the Sabbath day. This is my first Sabbath day I didn't keep. Which is December 13th. And the overseer, missionary Jonathan, calls my wife and he tells her, ask Deacon Clark if he's leaving the church. And if he's leaving the church, if he doesn't want to be a member of the church anymore, tell him to hand in the keys. Mind you, as I mentioned before, I live in the church. I live in the church. So he's telling my wife, if I don't want to be a member of the church anymore, turn in the keys. What does it mean? Get out. Get all your stuff and get out. And guess what? That was at night, December 13th of this year. Cold night. Cold night. And I had to, guess what? Pack up all my stuff. So I put all my clothes in a garbage bag, in garbage bags. They didn't even ask me if I had a place to go to. They didn't even say, "Hey, Deacon, do you need some time? I'll give you 2 days to get yourself together," or not even, "Oh, leave the next morning." Today, right now. So they sent the Deacon Rob, the assistant overseer, to get the keys. I didn't argue. I was like, no problem. I get all my things. I got all my things. They let my wife stay there, no problem. I'd rather her stay and have a place to stay. But for me, what do they say? Oh no, turn the keys in. It means what? Get out. So I didn't stay there that night. I couldn't stay there that night. They didn't ask me if I had a place to go. Mind you, a deacon in the Church of God, been there for almost 13 years, carried out a lot of missions for that church. I did so many things for that church as a deacon, as a faithful member, construction missions, contributions, all these different things. And this is how they treat your title holder? No place to go, no place to sleep, not even checking. Of course, that night I had a place to go. Thanks to God, I have a physical sister. But that's not the point. The point is that they didn't check if I had a place to go. So if you run in the same situation that I run in as a member, then guess what? They're not going to check if you have somewhere to go. They're not going to check if you have money to take care of yourself. They're not going to check if you have food to eat before they send you out. They're going to just say, give me the keys. So that's your missionary Jonathan that you guys, are all buddy buddy with, and you think that he loves you and cares about you. He doesn't care about you. Look what he did to me. I was a branch church leader, a deacon, baptism authority. You call me to baptize, guess what? I'm right over there. So the members who are there, the things that I've done. The construction that I did, how many council meetings that I had with members, including yourself. I was down to earth with those members, and I tried my best not to just follow, different leaders and everything like that. I tried my best to give my heart to those members, even though I had flaws and shortcomings. And this is how they do their title holder. So,
And
yeah,
Clark, I'm sorry to butt in, man, but also you contributed to the church, right? I'm assuming you paid for things in the church, correct?
absolutely. We were paying $900 a month to stay there. We were paying $900 a month, and then also we would give like an extra offering for like bills. So we would give like roughly like 1,000 a month, and if we made a little bit extra, we would give a little bit extra, right? There was a time where I did a big side job, and I made like a lot of money off that side job, and I gave an offering of like $800, right, to the church. This was apart from the rent or whatever the case may be.
So
So
you were it's like you were paying rent. You were paying rent to live there, and because you realized and you went about it the way they asked you to,
yeah,
it's like give me the keys. You're
yeah,
done.
like that, just like that. And even while being in there, I did. I even prepared a letter about receiving compensation. And before anyone, says like, "Oh, he wanted to get paid," hear me out. To inform you, if you don't know, missionary Jonathan gets paid from head office. There are overseers who do receive wages from head office. They receive some kind of compensation for what they do. I did the same kind of work as missionary Jonathan on a smaller scale. So he takes care of 300 to 400 members or whatever the case may be in the main temple. He's baptizing, he's delivering service on the third day and also the Sabbath day. He's doing all these things, right? Preaching every day. I was doing the same thing. I was preaching in public. I was delivering service on third day, Sabbath day, including afternoon and evening, right? And I was still baptizing. I was still counseling members. These are all the things that the overseer did. But at the time that I was doing it, on a smaller scale, I had a job that didn't cover everything completely. There was times where we were struggling. I had to work extra or try to get like another side job to make ends meet. So I begin to think about it, and I'm doing my own research. I look in the book of First Corinthians, and Apostle Paul says we should receive our wages, right, from the gospel. If I can take us to that verse, is that okay?
Yeah, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, First Corinthians. Um, there's the Second Corinthians.
What verse are you looking for, brother?
For those who preach the gospel should receive their wages from the gospel. It's either First or Second Corinthians. I would usually
First Corinthians 9.
First Corinthians 9.
Yeah, verse 14.
Yeah, I think that's it. I remember verse 14. Yeah, First Corinthians 9:14. In the same way, and pay close attention to this verse. It says in First Corinthians chapter 9, verse 14, in the same way, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should receive their living from the gospel. And Apostle Paul said this is the Lord's command. So it is a commandment of God that those who preach the gospel should receive their wage from the gospel. Me understand again, before I came to missionary Jonathan about this, I prayed about it, and I didn't do it for greed. I didn't ask for greed. I asked because I need stability. Carrying out pastoral staff duties, that pastoral staff needs stability so he can take care of those church duties. So I wrote a whole letter, and that letter was originally for head office. I just gave it to him so he could escalate the letter. In that letter, I let him know, I put on there like who I am and how long I've been in the church, the things that I do currently, and everything like that. And humbly, without greed, asking for some kind of compensation. It didn't have to be too much, but at least some kind of compensation, so that way I can balance my physical life and my spiritual life as far as taking care of the church members. And do you know what he does after he reads that letter?
What is that?
He chuckled. Like, huh. He said, Deacon, this is weird. This is weird. And I said, and at the time I said, I know it may sound weird, and I know the assistant overseers don't receive kind of any kind of payment, but this is what I'm asking because I'm not them. They're not me. They're not in my situation that I'm in. Because out of the all the, I was taking care of more members than their assistant overseers. Deacon Edgar in Allentown, he didn't have as many members as Second Philadelphia. This was the first branch from one of the first branches from the main temple. So I was dealing with almost 100 members. Deacon Max, guess what? Not even the same. He was in office church too. Maybe like 30 members he had. Deacon Rob, these are members, these are assistant overseers' names that I'm mentioning. Deacon Rob, same thing. He actually was just helping out in Harrisburg, which is a house church. They just sent him over to where I was to take care. I think they're going to transfer him over there. So they weren't in the same situation that I was in, although they were assistant overseers and I wasn't. And although they were theological students and I wasn't, the burden that I had was heavier than theirs. From my point of view, right? I don't know what they go through in their daily lives personally, but from where I was coming from, like I need to, right? So he said, I can't send this. I can't send this to head office. He said, also, this is kind of weird, Deacon. You gotta, if you need to work more, let me know. So again, I sent them the letter, asked for compensation. I get rejected. It didn't even get escalated to head office. But mind you, again, your overseer is receiving wages. He's being paid. He has an iPhone. He has an iWatch, Apple Watch, right? And they say, oh, the wages that we get is not much. Look, that's up for opinion. You say that, but towards, if you let me know how much you get paid, that might be a lot to me. The point is that you are receiving wages. You're receiving some kind of compensation from head office for what you're doing. But I'm telling you, I do the same thing that you do. So I shouldn't receive some kind of compensation. So anyway, I took it to the chin. I kept moving. I didn't ask about it again. I guess, and he looked at me as I was weird at that time, as weird from that time on. But this is what happened to me in the Church of God. So the reason for my leaving this church is a combination of all those things that I mentioned and more. And
Let me piggyback off something what you were saying because I just want to talk a little bit about what you mentioned there at the end because from what I'm seeing, Clark, is you are like the ideal in my eyes, the ideal member of the World Mission Society. If I was a leader in the World Mission Society, like if I was an overseer, you're the type of member that I'm looking for because you do everything by the book, right? And almost to a fault. Like you're a nice guy to a fault, it seems like in their eyes, because you're doing everything the right way. And it just shows you that even when you try to do things with the correct intentions, it's still received as foolishness or treated as something. They're not even hearing you out. These people that they're running ragged, these people that are doing everything for them, these people who are managing the churches, they don't even hear you out. Like you said, I understand 100% because I know what it's like to live inside the church and to have responsibilities and to be over a lot of members and to have a lot of these responsibilities. I know what that's like. I know what it's like counseling members. I know what it was like being paid by the church. I know what it was like when it wasn't much and when they're asking a lot of you, but the compensation that they're giving you in return is not matching, and you're not asking for compensation to live comfortably, to live lavishly. You're asking for compensation because whatever's going on in your life, the things that you're having to manage, the things that you're having to pay for, you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're struggling. We all have been there, especially when you're in a place like this. It's hard enough trying to hold down a job because you're constantly losing them. They discourage you from a lot of opportunities that we wouldn't even be in this mess if we took a lot of the opportunities that were offered to us. And so when we're asking them to have our back, we're not asking for much. Just, I can understand your mindset. I just need a little bit of help, even maybe just for the time being, to get out of this rough patch. And they look at you as you're crazy. And they even say that it's weird, but why is it weird? To me, that's more telling than anything, that they even have to say stuff like that it's weird, to try to once again shift it and make you feel like, just like when you doubt, when someone has a doubt because of a valid thing that they see online, they discredit you by laughing, chuckling, saying, oh, you felt because of that. I heard that a long time ago. I seen all that. I Then answer the question, bro. Don't tell me what you saw, what you answer the question. That'll tell me more than you trying to deflect. In the same way, by them saying, oh, that's weird behavior, to
That,
me, that's another way of deflecting, right? I'm not asking your opinion if you think what I'm saying is valid or not. I'm reaching out to you because I'm doing the correct thing. You're over me, so you need to address this situation. Addressing it is not saying that it's weird. The reason why, in my opinion, he has to say that is because he himself knows that is not permissible in the church of God. If he was to ask that, he would get rebuked,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And yet you see these people like Daniel Lee and all these leaders in the churches who have properties, who have companies. You hear so many things from people in Korea who were in the inner circle of the World Mission Society, how they're buying properties in different aliases, not to build churches. There ain't not one church built on these properties. Okay,
Mm.
I've seen houses on the East Coast, mansions with swimming pools, not churches. What does that have to do with the gospel?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You just,
And
I
you,
just,
and you can't take care of your branch church leaders, your assistant overseers. And I'm not saying like, don't take care of your assistant overseers and take care of me. Yeah, take care of your assistant overseers. The fact that you're taking care, that you're not paying them, that's your problem. You're not paying them. And if they think that's okay, if the assistant overseers are okay with that, not getting paid, okay. Maybe they get more blessings in heaven. But guess what? I needed balance. I needed stability. And I needed to, you know, carry on with my mission with some kind of compensation. And that's how I felt. And I feel like he didn't appreciate that. And he also did mention that, if I send this to head office, you probably won't even be recommended for for theological school, because he was trying to recommend me. So I told him, I was like, yeah, okay, no problem. At this point, I didn't really care about pre-theological entering as a student, because all the stuff that I had already known about and all the Bible studying that I've been doing. I was like, I don't even want to be a member of this church at this point, you know. But I was just on my way out at that time, and when I began to ask about the three chapters due to a member asking me, um, he began to like kind of like indirectly talk about me in educations, right? Three different times he talked about me, kind of like emphasizing, oh, if you're like in the beginning of one education, it was like an offline education. He's like, oh, if you're one of the members, and mind you, this offline education had nothing to do with that topic. It was about defending the truth. That's what that education was about. But he brings up in the beginning, right, a little intro. He says, "Oh, if you're shaken because of the three chapters and you've been in Zion for 10 years or longer, or whatever the case may be, then it means you didn't really believe." Now, mind you, the member that I told him had an issue with this, he was just baptized in August, so he hadn't even studied the 70 subjects, right? So he couldn't have been talking about him. So he's indirectly talking about me, knowing that I was zoomed in on that education. Then he did it another time. right? And on the Sabbath day during the education, brings the same point up again. Then another time at the group leader and branch church leader education, saying that same thing, bringing up the 3 chapters all 3 times. So I addressed him about it. I said, Missionary Jonathan, I think that he asked me one night, oh, Deacon, like, I feel like something's like off with you. And it was. I wasn't comfortable in that church anymore. And I told him directly, I said, Missionary, honest with you, I felt like you were just talking about me in all those 3 educations, trying to say that I'm shaking. And you could have just told me directly, or you could have just followed the Bible, like it says in Jude, if I can go to that verse,
Yeah,
about
so too.
about those who doubt, right? How should leaders be towards people who doubt, towards the members that doubt? Jude chapter 1, verse 22, it says, be merciful to those who doubt. And if you saw that I was doubting, and if you saw that that new brother was doubting, why weren't you merciful towards us about it? Why indirectly talk about me? And why call that member Zebedee? Why call him, why say, oh, he might be a false servant? You don't really know about him. He might be a false servant. Why would you say something like that? Instead of saying, hey, let's study with him more. Has he studied he didn't even study everything. So how can you conclude with that? So this is what I'm talking about. They're not even going by the Bible, not being merciful to those who doubt. Was it merciful to me and wasn't merciful to him? You're going to say something?
Yeah, I want to answer that question for you, Clark. Why they didn't do that? Because they don't have the answer.
Exactly.
That's why.
Exactly.
If they had the answer, they would
Right.
they you could not get them to shut up. They
Exactly.
will they will elaborate, they will squeeze everything out of it.
Yeah.
But because they don't have the answers, you see them scrambling. It's easier to blame someone and say they don't have faith. And this is a tactic that I've seen, more and more over the years, is if you really want to see the World Mission Society's true colors, ask them a question that they're not comfortable answering. Watch how they quickly begin to shift and try to deflect from answering they'll do everything but answer the question.
Right.
They'll literally look. Recently in the smoke room, I talked about how a question was brought up and they somehow brought up a reference to the Lion King,
Yeah.
right?
I saw that. Yep.
And from what I've heard also, the new Avatar movie, I'm from what I've been talking to a few ex-members, they think that the World Mission Society is going to be pulling from them pretty soon. So it seems like they're more busy trying to find these different connections and analogies that aren't biblical. You know what I mean? Because there is no right answer to these questions. And so I guess, I want to jump into that next because, you've already kind of talked about how you were ultimately going to exit the church and a little bit about that process. But I just kind of want to get into it formally. Like, was it a red flag or was it something? What was it specifically that did it for you?
Well, the red flags have been coming up all throughout my life of faith in that church. So those were always included in there, no matter what. But what really brought me out was the case with my fruit, Zebedee. I was studying with him, and it's been a long time since I bore fruit. And you know what they say: if you don't bear fruit, then you're spiritually endangered. This is written in one pastor's sermon books, right? So this was one of my fruit that I bore, and he was going on. Well, his wife was going on the internet, Karina. She was going on the internet, and she was seeing a lot of things, on there, and she was questioning. So she didn't want to get baptized because she felt like she needed to study more, which is fine. You want to study, take your time. I didn't talk to him about baptism until 3 months in of studying with him. So one thing led to another. He moves because he's in the military. So he gets stationed in Atlanta. And I pretty much trying to get him located in a church in Atlanta, but he has more questions because he was exposed to, I guess, one podcast about someone talking about the removed chapters from the Green Book. So he begins to question me about those chapters in the Green Book. Like, did you ever see these chapters? What is he talking about? He brought up Elijah, all those kinds of things. So at the time, I can't answer his questions because guess what? I don't have those chapters. So I can't answer those questions. And these are questions stemming from a source that I don't have access to. So I said, look, brother, I don't know the answer to those questions. Let me ask my overseer. I asked my overseer, and he says, let me ask head office because he didn't know either. He asked head office, and head office comes back with some answer that I couldn't understand. And in between the time that I get a answer from head office from my overseer, time has gone past. So I think 2 or 3 weeks has gone past, and I've been continued to ask him. I said, "Oh, missionary, did you get an answer yet?" "Oh, no, deacon." I called him, asked him again, over some time. "Do you get an answer yet?" I was like, and I told him, I said, "I don't mean to be a nag, but Zebedee's on my head about this. He doesn't want to go to church if he doesn't get an answer about this." So that answer comes up. He goes into like First Kings or something about Elijah, how he didn't fulfill like a certain prophecy. And to those who are watching, you have to look at the chapter that that they're referring to. And for those who want to know, you can call me if you have my number, and or you can reach out to Edgar or whatever the case may be, because of course Edgar has like a lot of ammo, a lot of information, evidence he can show you. So I didn't get an answer from the church, a clear answer from the church. So guess what I do? I start looking at these podcasts, and then eventually I reach out to Edgar, and then guess what? Edgar shows me everything. So now, after Edgar shows me all these things, I go back to the church and I go into detail about what's said in these chapters. And then, that kind of answer comes out. I can't repeat the answer because, again, like I mentioned, I don't understand it, because
It
guess
made
what?
no sense.
It doesn't make sense. So that's why I'm not good at repeating nonsense. Okay, it'll go in one ear out the other. So that's how the beginning of me exiting the church started. It was because they were being dishonest. They didn't want to show me the actual book, because I requested to see the actual book. They didn't let me do it. They said that we don't have it. And I was like, well, someone has it because it's being shown all over the internet. Someone has it. If the people who are against our church has it, then why doesn't our church itself have it? Y'all should have it. Also, if you're going to quote from books that we don't have in person, then you should get that book so we can actually see it, right? Get a hold of that book. But that was my problem, like not being honest and everything, and not being straightforward. And that's why I exited that church.
Yeah, and so I think it's important to highlight that, you left, like you had mentioned before, because of the doctrine. Because a lot of people, and again, we're not taking away from the members that left because they were burned out, the members that left because of mistreatment and all that. Those are 100% valid. You know what I mean? Like people leave for different reasons. I'm just glad that they left. You know what I mean? But I also think it's very important to highlight people that left also because of what you mentioned. Because what they'll do is they'll say, look, everyone that's leaving, they're leaving because of treatment, but they're not leaving because of the doctrine. That is simply not the case. I left because of the doctrine. You left because of the doctrine. There's a lot of people that I'm in contacts now with that are leaving because of the doctrine. And I think that that's very important to highlight, because their bread and butter is to say that their truth. They say, yeah, they can talk about this, they can talk about that, but one thing they cannot talk about is the doctrine. The doctrine is solid. No one can refute this doctrine. Clark, can this doctrine be refuted?
This doctrine from the Roman Church of God,
Yes.
absolutely, absolutely, 100%, and I'm fully convinced. And one thing that I want to mention to the members who are still in there, if you only just listen to what they tell you and not ask questions, or you're just comfortable, you're just coasting in there, you'll never get out of it. You'll just only be moved by fear. But if you actually study your own Bible and look at the context, this entails you actually going home, setting up your desk and just looking at the Bible verses yourself. You have to study yourself. You can't just let people tell you things. And of course, like you can receive a Bible study or whatever the case may be, but in those Bible studies, ask questions, read before and after the chapter, the verse, because that is what's necessary. Like you guys mentioned before, the Berean Jews in Acts chapter 17, verse 11, right? They studied to see if what Apostle Paul was saying was true. So it's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with studying your Bible. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. And I know some title holders know what I'm talking about. And you don't want to feel bad because members might think, oh, why is that deacon or why is that group leader asking the overseer this question? New members should be asking. You got to break that concept out of your head. Because at the end of the day, this is about your salvation. This is about you and everyone else going to heaven. And if you're going to, let that pass by just because it's a little bit of embarrassment, well, then guess what? Then that's sad. Because I'm willing to ask a question and be embarrassed. But guess what? If it leads me one more step to the kingdom of heaven, then guess what? I'm going to ask that question until I get an answer. And that's what the Church of God couldn't give me. They kept dancing around me, trying to give me little analogies and trying to give me like little examples and everything that didn't even make sense. Missionary John did try to give me all that night that he tried to tell me about, you know, looking at those 3 chapters, like eating from tree of knowledge of good and evil, trying to convince me to not do that. All of his examples and the verses that he went to, it didn't make sense. I was questioning him. We were dancing around that night, and he could not convince me. And I kept hitting the point. I want to see all those books. I want to see all the writings. Until I see those books and writings, I don't want to hear anything else. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. That was the night that I lastly talked to him. And then that was on a Friday. So the next day was Sabbath. He said, I'll see you and your wife here at the main temple. Because that day I told him that I didn't feel comfortable with delivering service. I didn't feel any kind of conviction. I didn't feel any kind of passion or any kind of, right, you know, strength to deliver a sermon because I felt like what I was delivering would be falsehood.
Right.
So I told him, I said, look, he was like, yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow. And I was like, okay. And then before I left, he said, Deacon, I love you. I love you. And I said, God bless you. I didn't even tell him I love him back. Because it was like at that moment, in their eyes, trying to help a member understand is like life or death, right? If they don't understand, then it's a possibility they'll die spiritually. But if they understand, then guess what? You just saved them. I left that room without understanding. So you're just gonna let me spiritually die like that? You're gonna let me spiritually leave and die? He didn't have any urgency to get me what I asked for. Again, no urgency, no care. If you don't understand, okay, no problem. Go your way. Go your way. So that's exactly what I did. And let me be clear. I am so happy right now. I am in peace right now. I feel peace. I'm going back to the gym. I'm in shape. Before I wasn't even watching my weight really, but I can actually take care of myself, both physically and spiritually. I read my Bible every day, I'm trying to make sure that, I have my own personal relationship with God, and trying to make sure my life is stable because when you leave out of that church, you realize, wow, I'm not even really stable in this in life. Like
Yeah.
I was so ready to go to heaven or whatever the case may be, or just But
Yeah.
I'm so thankful that I am where I am now, and I really pray and hope that the members in that church can wake up and don't just let them feed you what they want to feed you. You have to ask questions, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just remember that. And you studying on your own, you doing your research, there's nothing wrong with that,
Yeah.
right? So
Facts. No, man, that you hit the nail on the head, bro. Like, I mean, everything you said there is truth. And then, even I was thinking about when you were mentioning about Jesus and how, the disciples, how, look at the difference between biblical Christianity, the church 2,000 years ago, and the behavior of the World Mission Society. Like you mentioned, the World Mission Society tap dances. They honestly should send a lot of the leadership to Dancing with the Stars. I think that they do very good, or maybe America's Got Talent, because they definitely know how to dance around questions. And the fact is, when you ask questions, that are have a very simple answer. It's either you know the answer and you give the answer, or I don't know. But when they dance around, right, and treat us like we're dumb,
Yeah.
they're just revealing themselves even more. And so I want members to that are watching this to pay attention. If you ask your leadership hard questions that they don't have answers to, if they start deflecting, that should be a red flag that maybe this place isn't as truthful as you thought, that maybe they're hiding something, that maybe all of the truth is not in this place, because it's not hard to give an answer.
Yeah.
And when Clark mentioned earlier about them dancing around the questions, right? And making you feel bad. You said something that stood out to me. You said, and this is why I respect you a lot, man. Honestly, like you're reminding me a lot of like Ron Ramos and a lot of other people that I have spoken to off camera that are just genuine people. But I heard you say something that I can really relate to, where you said you would be willing to ask a question and be looked at as like dumb, or looked at as, like made fun of or rebuked or whatever it was. I forgot how you worded it, but all these things were not good things. You would be willing to be looked at that way, but have the answer, because you want to. It reminds me of me. I want to be sure of what I believe. I don't care if people look at me as I'm dumb, if I lack faith, if I don't care, as long as I have the answer so that I can stay here planted and also help other members, because that was my goal. Everyone that knows me, they know that I was always about helping. I always wanted to encourage members, strengthen their faith, everything, even if I had to ask the tough questions that nobody else was willing to ask. But that being said, that reminds me of something. This is why I'm bringing it up. We're willing to ask those questions, knowing how the WMSCOG responds to that. Now, watch the difference between the early church and even Jesus Christ himself 2,000 years ago.
Right.
Jesus Christ himself was asked questions by the disciples. This is God himself.
Yep.
This is not just a leader. This is God in the flesh. And guess what he did? Answered those questions.
Answer them.
And there was something, because I can already, I'm already putting my member hat on. I try to stay 2 steps ahead of the game. They might say, but there was times when Jesus rebuked the disciples for asking them a certain question, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's few, but true. But here's the difference. Even after saying what he said, guess what he still did? Answered the questions. These people, they'll do everything but answer the questions. They'll give you everything but what you're asking them for. And that's a red flag.
And you know what another red flag is? I find it very weird that even overseers haven't read these so-called books that they themselves quote from. Why don't these overseers who are entrusted to hundreds and even thousands of members don't know the things that the Church of God has been holding back? That in itself is a red flag, because even overseers can't even answer these questions. And if new members can ask these questions, why can't an overseer answer them? Also, why can't an overseer know what's actually written in them? At least they should know, right? But they don't know. So members, just think it. Those who are in the Church of God, just think about this. There's too many moving parts. There's too many moving parts going on in this church when it comes to the history of Ansang Hong, when it comes to the history of Zangil Jia, when it comes to their failed prophecies. There's too many moving parts, and too many people's hands have been moving them, right? It's been tossed around. That I have a problem with, because it means that this is not a God-given thing. It's all what? Man-made. And if it's something that's man-made and is built off of falsehood, can it equate to salvation? Absolutely not. So don't ask questions because, right, you just want to get an answer just to simply get an answer. Ask the question, realizing that this is a means to you receiving salvation. If you change your mindset, think, this is my life. This is my life. If I'm worshiping a false God right now and I die, where's my soul gonna go? Ask yourself that question. Because the fact that I left, I'm okay, but you know what? I'm still hurt inside because all those other members in there that are really good members, these are really good people. I've talked to them directly. I've worked together with them, had many good memories with many pictures with them. I care about those members too. And I feel so bad that they are engulfed with all this falsehood. And then now, me, I'm being looked at, and everyone else that left the church is being looked at as like a Judas Iscariot. They're messing your mind all up. This has nothing to do with what happened 2,000 years ago. That's what they want you to think. Oh, the same thing happened with Judas. I'm not Judas. I'm not Judas. There's no money involved with this that's going on right now. I'm still waking up every day, going to work, and everything like that. Judas, what did he do? He did it for 30 silver coins. Ask Edgar how much he paying me right now for this. There's no
Zero.
there's no money involved because my salvation is more important than $1. This has nothing to do with money. And as you can clearly understand, those who know me, I don't have no evil spirit inside of me. I didn't go crazy. Y'all know me. So please realize and understand what's really going on. Ask questions and just know something's not right. And I know y'all are tired of going preaching every single day, right? From morning to evening, every single day, doing the same thing over and over again, not getting any rest. And I know because I used to take care of I used to have the unit leaders that were under me. Every time, the unit leaders will always have an excuse on why they couldn't come to church. They were tired. I knew they were tired. That's why whenever they say, "Oh, I can't come," before I used to question them, like, "Oh, why not?" But then, with the mind of those leaders, right? Just being, But then I stopped eventually. When I came to understand and open my eyes were open through God's grace, I began to just let them like, okay, no problem. You need some time off? Go ahead, no problem. You got to have a doctor's appointment, although this is like the third or fourth doctor's appointment you had this month. No problem. You can go ahead and do it. I would never I wouldn't question them at some point. And I just let them because I knew they were tired because I felt tired too. So I knew they didn't want to be there every day. And I knew they were tired about hearing preach, 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 preach. If you don't preach, then this will happen. If you don't preach, that will happen. If you don't preach, then you're spiritually dead. Right? I know, members, I know you are tired. And I know you don't want to do the things that you're doing every single day, all throughout the year, especially for those who've been in there for 20 years. I know you're tired. But what if I could tell you that whole church, that whole doctrine is false? And you don't have to be in there all day. And you can get rest. You can do what you have to do. You can have fun with your family and still believe in God correctly and worship God correctly and go to heaven. When you find that out, you will feel so free. You will be so happy. And you will give thanks to God. Jesus came to give us true peace. And that was the salvation that he granted through his sacrifice, right? He came to give us true peace. But when you go into the World Business Society Church of God, it's like you're entering slavery all over again. You're entering slavery again. They're telling you to go out and preach and for many hours, not paying you anything, rebuking you, telling you how much of a sinner you are. You got to realize this is not God's will. This is not God's will. The core of what they preach, not God's will. Everything that's not God's will. So just think about it, step back for a little bit and just think about your experience in that church and then consider all the sermons. Oh, this is King David really is that really a prophecy that is in the Bible about second coming Christ? Won't you read Isaiah 9, 6, and 7 clearly? How the Bible says that he will reign on the throne forever. Right? Won't you read those prophecies? Does the Bible say that Christ had to come back a second time and actually preach for 37 years again? Right? To preach for 37 years to fulfill a 40-year reign? Does the Bible really say that? Or are they cherry picking verses and transition it into that kind of, or concluding with that kind of point? Think about it. Think about it. So, Edgar, I got a lot. I got a lot. You know, we're gonna have to do part two, part three, and I must tell y'all, I'm not done. I'm not done. And there are gonna be people who come on here that you're gonna be very surprised about. But guess what? Look, it's because this is true. Edgar just said, Pastor Daniel Lee's daughter just left. That's supposed to be the prophet, right? So his daughter should know better. His daughter should know better than to leave. She should have all the faith. Also, she was the wife of an overseer. Most of you know him. He was missionary David before he left New Windsor or whatever the case may be, or wherever he was on the East Coast. He was missionary David. You all know him. He's Elder David now. He's in Vegas. But guess what happened? His wife left. That's supposed to be pastoral staff wife. So just think, why are these people leaving? Ask yourself this question. Also, why am I leaving? Those who know me, why am I leaving? You know the sermons that I delivered. You know to the extent I delivered those sermons. Maybe some of you might have your own personal opinions about me, but it is what it is. I'm a sinner, right? But think about it. Think about it. You guys know me. So why am I at this point now? Did I just leave because some you say, oh, internet slander? Did I just leave because of that? Also, if I didn't really have faith, why you make me a deacon? Why you make me have a person with baptism authority? Why are you entrusting me to so many members if I never had faith in the first place? Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. So just think about that. Just think about that. And even to this day, I can do a Bible study with anybody. I didn't stop reading the Bible. I didn't slow down. In fact, I have more energy with the Bible than I ever had before. So if you see me in a Walmart and you want to talk, oh, also by the way, please don't try to preach that around me to a customer because I'm going to go back to that customer and tell them, like, look, that's not true. I'm sorry. It's nothing personal against you, but I will go back to that customer and tell them, don't listen to what they're saying. And I will do a whole Bible study with that customer and tell them what they should really believe in, right? To that Walmart customer or to that Target customer. Don't preach around me. Because if you preach around me, you're going to wish you didn't. I'm going to make you not even want to preach for a couple weeks. All right.
I love it.
I'm from Philly too, so just know I can be, I can get. So I'm just saying I'm I won't go hard on you personally, but what I'm saying is don't do that around me because I'm willing to preach too. I'm willing to still preach. I'm not even going to stop preaching. I will preach the gospel that Apostle Paul preached and that the apostles preached. That's what I'm going to preach. So if you're gonna preach and you see me, you better please be ready. Don't if you're gonna try to approach me, be ready. I'm letting you know, be ready.
Facts.
All
Hey
right.
yo, I love the energy, Clark, and I just want
Yeah.
to say I just hope that the World Mission Society that's watching this, I hope that you guys understand that 2026 is gonna get worse for you guys. And if you guys think this is a one-off thing, nah, I think me and him working together is gonna do some damage, and I'm looking forward to what we got cooking up. But I'm also looking forward to seeing more members leave and more people of titles leave, and we're seeing it already happening in real time right now. And the WMS has a serious problem on their hands that they need to address. And let me give you guys some advice, WMS. You need to start addressing it with answers, not Lion King references, not Avatar, not prophecies of the spiritual Mufasa. No, you guys need to get into the scripture. You guys need to start answering these things. You guys need to start showing your members things that you were not willing to show them in the past. You need to give them all of the books, but you won't do it. You know why? Because the moment that you do, they're going to realize that it's all a lie.
Yep.
And even if they do give them to them, I want them to. Even if they do give it to them, because we're putting so much pressure on them and they've denied them for such a long time, even if they do, members, when you read it, don't let them try to explain it away. Read it for yourselves, even if whether if they give it to you or whether you stumble across it yourself, because at this point it's open information. You can get it anywhere. You can hit me up. I got everything. Clark is a witness to that. I got everything that you want to see. I got it. I got things that I haven't even posted online. I got videos, I got everything, anything you can imagine. I got it. So if you got questions, holler at me. We're here to help and answer any questions that you might have. But that being said, Clark, I just want to thank you for doing this, bro. And yeah, man, I'm very appreciative to you. Do you got anything else you want to say before we wrap this thing up?
Hey, I want to say I give all glory and thanks and praise to God, right? I give all thanks and praise and glory to God. And 2026 is going to be a great year. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to World Missionary Church of God. Merry Christmas. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, happy new year to the World Mission Society Church of God. Merry Christmas. Those who have been watching for this whole year, I hope that you guys benefited from the content. I hope that the people that have reached out, I hope that I was able to help out in any way possible. And I hope that you guys saw how we started at the beginning of the year and how we're ending it. And this is just 1 year. Obviously, I've been doing this for 5 years now, but this is the first year where I really went on YouTube. And so we're seeing the fruits of our labor, and God willing, 2026 is going to be the start of even something more amazing, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger from there. So once again, Clark, thanks for coming on the channel, man, and sharing your story. I'm looking forward to working with you, bro. And until next time, hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Diffusing the WMSCOG.